Hi guys, welcome back to Christy's Book Corner. I'm your host, Christy Mason, and we're going to continue with Inkheart. And it's chapter 22! Chapter 22, In Safety. They did let Eleanor into the bank, despite her toned stockings. Before that, however, she had disappeared into the ladies' room after the first cafe they came to. Maggie never did find out exactly where Eleanor had hid her valuables, but when she returned her face was washed, her hair was not quite as tangled, and she was triumphantly waving a gold credit card in the air. Then she ordered breakfast for everyone. It was an odd feeling to be suddenly sitting in a cafe having breakfast, watching perfectly ordinary people outside the street, going to work, shopping, or just standing around chatting. Maggie could hardly believe they had spent just 2 nights and a day in Capricorn's village, and that all this, the bustle of ordinary life, could only outside the window, hadn't stood still the whole time. Nonetheless, something had changed. Ever since Maggie had seen Basta hold his knife to Mo's throat, it had seemed as if they were a stain on the world, an ugly, dark burn mark still eating its way toward them, stinking and crackling. Even the most harmless things seemed to be casting suspicious shadows. A woman smiled at Maggie, then stood looking at the bloody display in Butcher's windows. A man pulled the child along after him, so impatiently that the little boy stumbled and cried as he rubbed his grazed knee. Why was the man's jacket bulging over his belt? Was he carrying a knife like Basta? Normal life now seemed imponderable, unreal, like flight through the night, and the terror she had felt in the ruined house seemed more real to Maggie than the lemonade that Eleanor passed over to her. Farid hardly touched his own glass. He sniffed its yellow contents, took a sip, and went back to looking out the window. His eyes could hardly decide what to follow first. His head moved back and forth as if he were watching an invisible game and desperately trying to understand its rules. After breakfast, Eleanor asked at the cash desk which was the best hotel in the town. While she paid the bill with her credit card, Maggie and Mo examined all the delicious behind the card Maggie last counter. Then to their surprise, they turned around and found that Dustfinger and Farid had disappeared. Eleanor was very worried, but Mo claimed her fears. You can't tempt him with a hotel bed. He'd prefer never to sleep under a roof, he said. He's always gone his own way. Perhaps he just wanted to get away from here, or perhaps he's around the next corner, putting on a performance for a tourist. I can assure you, he won't go back to Capricorn. What about Farid? Maggie couldn't believe he had simply run after with Dustfinger, but Mo only shrugged his shoulders. He was sticking close to Dustfinger all the time, he pointed out, though I don't know whether he or Gwen was the real attraction. The hotel recommended Eleanor by the staff in the cafe was on a square just off the main street that passed right through the town and was lined with palm trees and shops. Eleanor took 2 rooms on the top floor with balconies that had view of the sea. It was a big hotel. A doorman in the elaborate costume stood at the entrance, and although he seemed surprised by their lack of luggage, He overlooked their dirty clothes with a friendly smile. The pillows were so soft and white that Maggie had buried her face in them at once. All the same, the sense of unreality didn't leave her. A part of her was still in Capricorn's village, or trudging through thorns, or cowering in the ruins, level and trembling as Basta came closer. Mo seemed to feel the same. Whenever she glanced at him, there was a distant expression on his face, and instead of the relief she might have expected, after all they had been through, she saw sadness in it, and a thoughtfulness that frightened her. "You're not thinking of going back, are you?" she asked at last. She knew him very well. "No, don't worry," he replied, stroking his hair. But she didn't believe him. Eleanor seemed to share Maggie's fear, for she was to be seen several times taking earnestly to Mo in the hotel corridor outside her room, at breakfast, at dinner. But she felt sullen abruptly as soon as Maggie joined them. Eleanor called the doctor to treat Mo's arm, although he didn't think it necessary, and she brought them all new clothes, taking Maggie with her because, as she said, "If I choose you something myself, you won't wear it." She also did a great deal of telephoning and visiting every photo bookshop in the town. At breakfast on the third day, she suddenly announced that she was going home. "I've already rented another car," she said. "My feet are better now. I'm dying to see my books again, and if I see one more tourist in swimming trunks, I shall scream. But before I leave, let me give you this." With these words she passed Mo a piece of paper across the table. It had a name and address on it in Eleanor's large, bold handwriting. "I know you, Mortimer," she said. "I know you can't get Inkheart out of your head, so I found you Fenelongo's address. It wasn't easy, I can tell you, but after all, there's a fair chance that he still has a few copies. Promise me you'll go to see him. He lives not far from here, and put the copy of the book still in that wretched village out of your mind once and for all." Mo stared at the address as if he were learning it by heart, then put the piece of paper in his new wallet. "You're right. It really is worth a try," he said. "Thank you very much, Eleanor." He looked almost happy. Maggie didn't understand any of this, but she knew one thing. She'd be right. Mo was still thinking of Inkheart. He couldn't come to terms with losing it. "Who's Fenelongo?" she asked uncertainly. "A bookseller for something. The name seemed familiar, though she couldn't remember where she had heard it." Mo didn't not reply, but gazed out of the window. "Let's go back with Eleanor, Mo," said Maggie. "Please?" It was nice going down to the sea in the morning, and she liked the brightly colored houses, but all the same, she wanted to leave. Every time she saw the hills rising behind the town, her heart beat faster, and she kept thinking she saw Basta's face, or Flatnose's, among the crowds in the streets. She wanted to go home, or at least to Eleanor's house. She wanted to watch Mo giving Eleanor's books new cloths, pressing fragile gold leaves into the leather with his stamps, choosing end paper, stirring glue, trusting the press. She wanted everything to be as it had been before the night when Dustfinger turned up. But Mo shook his head. "I have to pay this visit first, Maggie," he said. "After that we'll go to Eleanor's, the day after tomorrow at least." Maggie stared at her plate. What amazing things you could have for breakfast in an expensive hotel. But she didn't feel like waffles with fresh strawberries anymore. "Okay, then I'll see you in a couple days' time. Give me your word of honor, Mortimer." There was nothing missing in the concern in Eleanor's face. "You'll come even if you don't have any luck with Fenologo. Promise?" Mo had to smile. "My solemn word of honor, Eleanor," he said. Eleanor heaved a deep sigh of relief and bit into the croissant, and had been waiting on her plate all this time. "Don't ask me what I had to do to get hold of that address," she said with her mouth full. "And in the end, the man doesn't live far from here at all. About an hour's car journey. Odd that he and Capricorn live so close to each other, isn't it?" "Yes, odd," murmured Mo, looking out of the window. The wind blew through the leaves of the palms in the hotel garden. Yep. "His stories are nearly always still in this region," Eleanor went on, "but I believe he lived abroad for a long time and moved back here only a few hours ago." She beckoned to a waitress and asked for more coffee. Maggie shook her head when the waitress asked if she would like anything else. "Mo, don't want to stay here. Mo, I don't want to stay here," she said quietly. "I don't want to visit anyone either. I want to go home, or at least back to Eleanor's." Mo picked up his coffee cup. It still hurt when he moved his arm. "We'll get it over with tomorrow, Maggie," he said. "You've heard Eleanor. It's not far away, and by the end of the day after that, you'll be back in Eleanor's huge bed, the one that had a whole school class could sleep in." He was trying to make her laugh, but Maggie couldn't. She looked at the strawberries on her plate. How red they were. "I also have to rent a car, Eleanor," said Mo. "Can you lend me the money? I'll pay you back as soon as we meet up again." Eleanor nodded. Her gaze lingered on Maggie. "You know something, Mortimer," she said. "I don't think your daughter is very keen on books just now. I remember the feeling whenever my father got so absorbed in a book that we might have been invisible. I felt like taking a pair of scissors and cutting it up, and now I am as mad about them as he was. Oh, well, that's something to think about, huh?" She folded her napkin and pushed back her chair. "I'm going upstairs to pack, and you can tell your daughter who Finnegan is." Then she was gone, leaving Maggie at the table with Mo. He ordered another coffee, even though he usually drank no more than one cup. "What about your strawberries?" he asked. "Don't you want them?" Maggie shook her head. Mo sighed and took one. "Finnegan is the man who wrote Inkheart," he said. It's possible that as the author he will still have some copies. Indeed, it's more than possible. It's very possible. Probable." "Oh, come on," said Maggie scornfully. "Capricorn's sure to have stolen them long ago. He stole all the copies. You saw that." But Mo shook his head. "I don't believe he will after thought of Funagolo. Who You know, it's a funny thing about writers. Most people don't stop to think of books being written by people such like themselves. They think that writers are all dead long ago. They don't expect to meet them in the streets or out shopping. They know their stories, but not their names, or certainly not their faces. And most writers like it that way anyway. That way, you heard Eleanor say it was quite hard for her to get a hold of Furnigo's address. Believe me, it's more than likely that Capricorn has no idea that the man who wrote the story lives scarcely 2 hours drive away from him. But he wasn't so sure. She thoughtfully pleated the tablecloth, then smoothed out the pale yellow fabric again. "All the same, I'd rather we went to Eleanor's house," she said. "I don't see why." She hesitated, but then finished what she had been going to say. "I don't see why you want the book so much. It's no use, anyway. My mother's gone," she added in her thoughts. "You tried to bring her back, but it doesn't work. Let's go home." Mo helped himself to another of her strawberries. She's the smallest of all. "The little ones are always the sweetest," he said, and put it in his mouth. Your mother loved strawberries. She couldn't get enough of them, and she was always terribly cross if it rained so much in spring that they rotted in her strawberry bed. A smile lit up his face as he looked out of the window again. "Just this one last shot, Maggie," he said. "Just this one, and and they and the day after tomorrow we'll go back to Eleanor's. I promise." The end of chapter 22. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, comment, and like, and I will see you in my next video. Not stay classy, but remember to dare to dream. Bye.